Today, I'm going to need Matthew to grab a strong drink because we're going to do what we always promise to do on this show. And what's that? It's to get real, it's to get raw. And that's because we're talking about compensation plans.
Oh no, no, we're not.
And we've been doing a lot of this at Acuity because we're currently taking a good hard look at some aspects of our own comp plans. And it's just tough. Compensation is one of those topics. It's a bit like religion and politics. Are you really supposed to talk about it? Well, I don't know, probably not, but we're going to. That's what we do here, right? That's how we try to fix things, make things better, make improvements. All of that here today on Drink While You Think, the weekly happy hour podcast between me and Matthew. Talk about what we're doing to build this crazy firm. I'm your co-host, Kenji, and there's my buddy Matthew there to help me out. Matthew, I'll tell you, because we didn't talk before, who our sponsor is, and let's see how good you are at on the fly, being the hype promotional person for the one and only
Ours?
payroll company, ADP.
Oh no, I got to do one first. Today's episode, today's episode of Drink While You Think is brought to you by Woodford Reserve. Whenever you want to talk compensation plans, Woodford Reserve is your drink of choice. So, sorry, I had to do that.
That's pretty good. But very apropos, yes,
Today's
Woodford
oh,
Reserve for this, but also that we are talking compensation with ADP. But tell us about our other sponsor, ADP.
today's sponsor for Drink While You Think is ADP. ADP, payroll done right. If you haven't looked at ADP in a while, check it back out. It's not your father's payroll system anymore. ADP.
Oh, look at that, Matthew. Yes, the behemoth. They have been around. They know the game.
I know, but
And
they've
yeah,
done a ton of refreshes on tech
tons of them.
and then
Yeah.
they've got the PEO offering for people that know that. Like,
Don't
don't
sleep on
don't sleep
ADP.
on ADP.
They're great partners. And a big shout out to to Elaine and Mariana. And this is why I am Matthew, go ahead and show us what you're going to drink here first. But I am
Oh,
so pumped about this episode for what I'm drinking. You're drinking Woodford,
no,
Juliana?
I'm not. Like you didn't give me a notice on what the topic was, so I would be drinking over. I've got a new realm. I've got the Hazy Like a Fox IPA today. That's been in the fridge for a bit. So I'm pouring it because that sounds like a good summer kind of beer. We
It's a
got
summer beer.
May the Fourth be with you and Cinco de Mayo coming up this weekend. So
Yeah.
a nice
Hazies you're not
hazy
supposed to let
IPA.
sit too long. Not most to your style, but you might like that. That's one of our favorites. That's nice, Matthew. It's one of our favorites, at least from probably one of the better porches, one of the better places to go hang in Atlanta. New Realm's got the spot. They may have the best spot
Oh,
in town.
they might have one of the best spots in Atlanta. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Okay. This is a beer.
They have one of my favorite beers too.
Do they?
They do the
They
Oaxaca Chaca there.
Oh, that's true. That is there.
So,
So whenever you're in town in Atlanta, come meet me and Matthew. He'll have a Oaxaca chocolate. And I just love that patio. That's my
oh,
one of my
that's where
favorite
we
spots.
took Jamie and crew from Practice Protect, right?
We've taken a bunch of people there, but yeah, we
So,
took Jamie and crew. We
yeah,
drank
you come from
quite
Australia.
quite
We'll hook you up. We'll hook you up.
quite
We'll
a
hook
few.
you up.
All right, you ready for this? Dude,
Go
I am
ahead.
stoked about this one. All right, check this out. It's called the Lady Brett. And this is from Elsewhere Brewing here in Atlanta. I didn't know Elsewhere very well. They're out of Grant Park, and they've got a spot over on the west side of town. And what's really cool about this beer, this is a really special one they do. But our one of our big partners over at ADP, Mariana, is a. Do you know what a Matthew is called a cicerone? Do you know what that is?
Is that like a psalm for beer?
Yes, it's a sommelier for beer. She is one. I mean,
Okay.
like we just found in one of our partners, like a next level beer nerd. That's like you're talking our love language.
We're
And
gonna
so
have
she
to
got this. This is a
pair her
very,
up
this is
with.
a very special. You know it's special, right, Matthew? And look, you got to
Oh,
twist off. So you're gonna have to give me a second. I got to do some work, and I'm twisting things off like a champagne bottle here. I mean, I'm in beer nerd
we
heaven.
might
If
we
I
might be here for a while, guys.
Well, feel free to talk about all the great payroll solutions they have. Like open this beer, and I just go crazy about how amazing it's going to be. All right, here we go. Come on, open up, please. I need to get to this magical beer here on a
You need to
nice.
start working out too. Like
It's here we go.
this is like for the people not watching on YouTube, this is like
They're listening.
terrible
This is
podcast. Like
look at like Nick. I mean, this is going to be like you're going to hear it in the podcast. Oh my gosh.
they can't hear
Pavlov.
anything. I can't hear
Yes,
anything, dude.
sure you can.
So,
That's because you're old. Okay, Matthew, cheers.
cheers, dude. He even has
And
the right kind of glass for it. It's just annoying.
I always do. Oh, that smells good.
Okay. I'm halfway done with mine already, so let's go.
Yum. Don't you ruin my joy of beer nerddom. Okay. Let's talk a little
Okay.
compensation. I guess I want to think about like how would you build the perfect comp plan these days? I mean, and I say this in the terms of like
Yeah,
compensation is so tricky, and you're like thinking it's all isn't it all about alignment? You're trying to align incentives and work and value with compensation, and it's just damn hard. It's really when you really think about the act of doing it, like really well, like what does it take to get the perfect comp plan?
well, this is where I really struggle because the perfect comp plan is tailored to the person on the a person side, right? So the perfect comp plan for the employee is tailored to how they're driven and how they behave, right? Problem with that is if you have 150 employees, that requires 150 comp plans to be perfect, and you have to read minds because
Yeah,
usually when people are trying to get a job, they're not the most honest about everything. You just haven't gotten to that trust level yet, right?
right,
Um,
right.
so it's an impossible task is the frustration, right? To have like the perfect compensation arrangements at your company because you would have to tailor it to every single person. And I don't think you can do that at scale. Like you might be able to do that for 10 people,
Well,
but
it's just interesting. I mean, it's an
doesn't that bust pretty
interesting.
quick?
Okay, so let's walk this back.
Okay.
I guess if you say if we said we wanted to create the perfect compensation plan, and you say, well, it would have to essentially be customized by every individual. And you're right. You're talking. Think about that means their preferences, what's meaningful to them, how they perceive value, how they deliver value in the organization, what role they're in. There's so many different levels. I mean, people tend to think of, oh, you do comp, a more sophisticated company might do comp plans by level, or sorry, by role, by different roles and departments. That's getting pretty sophisticated. But I guess if you're talking about perfect, it would be really very unique to that individual, which
Yeah,
we're
but
talking perfectly customizable.
I can blow up the role thing with one example. Like I
Okay.
literally talked to somebody this week that their spouse has a platinum healthcare plan paid for by their employer, their spouse's employer.
Yeah.
So it's like the platinum version. They don't want to change healthcare.
Yeah.
So actively working here to work under 30 hours a week so we can't like we aren't required to offer healthcare. So like which is totally opposite what we're trying to do, which is trying to
Right.
make healthcare more available to people, right? But for people that like healthcare is a huge component to comp plans now that like we do a crappy job of explaining to people, right? From a
Yeah.
cost perspective when you look at the P&L, right? So like I think maybe it'd be better to talk about like how do you present this and stuff like this. I have a great example of how Georgia State does it for Laura with well like I literally they have this like pie that shows like only 3/4 of her little pie is her salary.
Yeah.
Like when they like all in what they're spending is like the retirement's like a huge chunk. Like she has additional compensation component, like a bonus component, and then like her health insurance, it's like 20 grand almost. It's $18,000 a year. Like
Yeah.
so it's a huge component to that thing. So like when
That's
I
a really
was
good job of
like,
communicating, right? In a
they
meaningful
do a
way that someone
great
can
job of
understand.
communicating
Yeah,
this, and I've
there's
kept
some,
it here as like something that we should think about doing because in this case, her pay is 74% of her total compensation arrangement, really, and like how much she like is like communicating how much she
right.
like they're investing in her and spending on her dollar for dollar. Well, it's crazy that only 75% of that is pay.
So you might, without you having to share every bit of your wife's comp details on our public podcast, but can you
Oh,
share just in general, hold on, in
I can do it
general,
if I cover
Matthew,
the numbers.
in general, is that graph specific to her as an individual?
Yes, it is with dollar.
That
I'm
was my only
covering up the
question.
dollar amounts, but like it is like specific to her, and
Okay.
it says like the different components to her.
So that's
Um,
not like, hey, this is the one that everybody gets, or
and it
everybody
and
in this
it
department, or
literally
everyone in this.
it literally at the bottom says USG's investment in you is the total line. Like
That's just savvy, right? That's just being. I bet you. Are there some line items in there you're like, okay, or
no, it's simple.
is it all pretty well calculated?
Base pay, bonus, health insurance and benefits, and retirement. But like retirement's 12% of her total
Yeah.
comp, like based on what they
Okay.
put in.
I asked that because I've seen some before where
You can't load
I've
a
seen
kitchen sink it. You can't be like,
exactly. Well, no,
oh,
that's my point. Where people
yeah,
have done that to where like they start throwing all these other benefits in there, and someone goes, "I don't perceive that as a benefit." Like, right? I don't see that as a benefit. Which is back to I think that's a great communication is a huge part of this. There's some areas we're looking at and learning and from, and I think all companies probably have this where you're like, "Ooh, we didn't communicate things well," or we're also not getting feedback as funneled through us as well and reacting to it. So there's always that component. But I think what's as you said something right to where customized to the individual, and it made me think of it's really trying to align value on both sides. It's
right.
what's valuable to me as an individual is going to be different than you. And then also the value you contribute to the company is going to be different. A salesperson, what their value is different than a controller is different than someone on
Man,
operations
even you
team. And
just look
so
in one role though. Like
even in the
just
same
if you
role,
just were oversimplifying and saying like, okay, our controller role or okay, our CFO role. Like even if you just said, okay, we're gonna give it to you that you have to have a different comp plan by role. Like even within the role, I can't figure it out. Like I can't like I can't design like the perfect plan. It's just incredibly,
well, there probably
incredibly
I would
frustrating.
have said maybe tell me what you think about this. Okay, you hear about executives at public companies who say, "Hey, I'll take $1 in cash comp, and I'll take all the rest of it in equity."
Right.
In many ways, I'd be like, "Oh, that's a really value aligned plan." But I guess is it? Is it? Maybe it's maybe more so than some. But then you're talking public markets and like timing of press
And
releases,
then,
and like
then people are like managing the street quarter to quarter, short term thinking
versus
versus long term.
operationally in the business. Yeah,
Like,
long term. I mean, so how do I mean?
like it's tricky, right?
It is tricky. It's tricky because different what we're the area that we're struggling with in Acuity right now to kind of be transparent to others and out there is when you look at certain activities that are very difficult to sometimes quantify. Sometimes we tend to weight things of like, oh, billing or revenue generation or new client acquisition, that counts as more value than some other administrative things that people do. And it's hard because you could take any activity you do in a company and you're trying to weigh that, like what has value, what doesn't, or not just value. All of them have some form of value, but it's hard to kind of look at them and like stack them up. Historically, the way that people looked at them was how do you spend a unit of time? That's just, we're going to use that as the proxy. I don't know, spend a unit of your time filling out an expense report or a time report, or you spend a unit of your time building a client, or a unit of your time trying to close a new deal. And just said, well, let's just assume time is the best, most simple proxy. Still, that's probably the way most of the world still works technically. But it's not exact. It has really doesn't always have anything to do with creating value. Um, and so it's just tricky. I think it's a very difficult way. I'm trying to even imagine like a utopian situation to where we
Well,
go, oh, we know exactly how people's effort aligns to the value they create. And then
well,
it comes back full circle in terms of value back to them.
well, I've been thinking about this a lot this week because we've oversimplified it, right? We've made it really simple. So, when I was at Cherry, we're like, you're trying to get 3 times revenue coverage out of people, right? Right. We're trying to be basically pay them a salary and then make them bill 3 times their salary plus
Right.
benefits, right? So we're trying to do, so if you do that, you're at a 60, 66, 65% margin business, right?
Right.
So from an order of magnitude perspective at Acuity, I've always looked at that and I was like, okay, that seemed high to me for that.
Well,
Like
it felt
that
high. You
seemed
lived in it and you felt it, right? What
I
did you
felt
feel?
I felt wrong in that. So, but if you get that to 50%, I know the effort that it takes to, kind of pull that off on the back end from the management side and from the infrastructure side. So if you get to 2 times, which is a 50% margin, that's where I've always aimed as like, okay, that would be a great goal, somewhere between 2 and 3 times, when you take healthcare, when you take um, comp, when you take all these things into case, if we're kind of between 2 and 3, like we're in the fairway, right?
Yeah.
We're like,
Yeah.
so from a company perspective, I kind of know what the amount is. The thing that has been eating my lunch this week is that if you don't charge enough for your services, you deflate that number for your employees too. So like my thinking, if we were like, oh, because we target small market, right, which compresses our rates. So if you're trying to meet a certain segment, like, and you're in my men's mindset where you're like, you have to have either 2 to 3 times revenue coverage, right? Like the rates you charge your customers are a crucial piece of that on what you can pay people,
Yeah.
right? Like total comp even. And I oversimplify it worse than that, but because I figure we're working with a bunch of accountants and they'll figure out that fact that we're kind of fair. We pay pretty fair for the segment we work in, but
Right.
I'm underestimating recently, like maybe that changes, what we go after, who we go after, that kind of stuff. And
Yeah. I think
it's challenging, right?
it's really challenging in terms of I'm still in really most things will always be a big believer of just simplification. I think trying to simplify um it just at least it just takes out a lot of miscommunications when you simplify, but it's funny, even when you do, it doesn't take out everything. And so
Yeah.
I like the fact that we try to keep it pretty simple, but it's one of those things where it's just compensation is not simple. Like I was thinking, okay, if you really were to I'm imagining the like how would you perfectly comp people for value creation? And that assumes also that creating value to an organization, which I think is pretty fair. That may be what we're trying to say. Everyone contributes in some way. Is as you contribute value, you should be paid some value in return.
Yeah.
You would need to have a real time, perfectly accurate appraisal mechanism for the business all the time. You'd have to have this so that every decision, every time someone makes a change to a process or helps a client or helps the team member, or every little action somehow matriculates into, we now have an accurate representation of enterprise value all the time. We say the stock market today is probably the closest people get but we know there's lots of manipulations and things
Yeah.
there that gives enterprise value to big companies. You can come up and look at so hey, what is Intuit or what is Google or what is whoever, let's take a look at their at their market value today, right? You could look at that. We could look it up. Private companies don't have that, and even the public ones aren't perfect. So you need some mechanism that sounds like it's, and then you'd have to say, wait a minute, okay, if you could you then do attribution? If you knew a real time to the second enterprise value, could you do attribution back to like, well, who was responsible for that? How
Yeah.
were they responsible? And can we then give people value based on that contribution toward enterprise value?
And
And
yeah, I
that may
like
not
where
even, that sounds like it could work, but that may not even work, even if
that
it was
so
possible.
I think that works with one twist. So I think and I that guy in Oregon or Washington or wherever he was, and he was like he raised everybody's salary to minimum to like 75K or 70K. You
Right.
remember that?
Right. Yeah, I do remember that. That
So
was,
I think if you're under 75K comp, like you got all other challenges to come up with, right? But for your people over 75K comp, I think your methodology with a 75K base to start, so they get the comfort of like this base salary
there
that
is some foundation you're maintaining of the, yeah,
that the
yeah.
foundation,
Yeah.
like, and then that incentive is laid on top of it for value creation. I think that's like if you're just going to take a model, you have to acknowledge the 75K or whatever that is with inflation, right? Like this is a place where people like stop worrying about money as much on a
Right.
day-to-day
Right.
basis. And then creating alignment above that with the company is, I think, the right goal. So I
Like,
think
yeah,
that's
you could, I guess, to use that, take that further, maybe use an example. Let's say someone's like, they took vacation or came back from a conference or had bad days at work or whatever like this. And we kind of did actually maybe took away some enterprise value, whatever it is. Somehow they heard you wouldn't go, hey, we're going to take it away from you. There's some level of like at least base of like where you're
yeah.
contributing. But
Yeah,
beyond that,
something at that 75 70K was what it came out with. That's been a few years ago. So somewhere between
yeah,
70 and 80K is where the base is there, something like
yeah,
that. And then
yeah.
some like
Above
that would
that,
be my
yeah.
dream that there would be some max salary that everybody could get, what like 80K, and then everything else was on alignment.
Variable, right? You have a fixed and variable piece. The fixed basically takes care of like we're not going to have to worry about our day-to-day needs.
Right.
But it's also not super compelling to you. But you have unlimited upside. If you can create unlimited value or huge outsized
Right.
value, wow, let's reward that individual. And so you need to have all these crazy valuation appraisal things there. And it's kind of fun to dream about that. Go, wow, if you had that, what a cool thing to see, like in real time, every decision you made or action you took, like how that impacted the value of the business you worked in. Like that'd be amazing. Like it would
Right.
probably make everybody a bunch of maniacs, right? Because if you could see that, you almost just could, I mean, those who are highly driven, like, I don't think I can turn it off. Like I'm going to do one more email or I'm going to do one more thing. And
But
it's
you got to
that,
remember, most people aren't past that highly driven on just that results. I mean, salespeople are, but like
yeah.
accountants in general, generally are driven by doing good work, liking the people they work with, liking their client base, like
Well, and probably
providing
in a model
value,
like that
like
too,
getting
I'm making
acknowledged,
a
right?
I'm making an incorrect assumption that more is always better. There's probably going to be some diminishing returns there of where like, okay, you're
Right.
spending more time, you're being more disruptive. There's something suddenly, wait a minute, I just closed one more deal or I did one more thing for a client. How suddenly did I impact this negatively, like the negative enterprise value? And those things could happen, right? You end up
Yeah.
burning yourself out or giving yourself a health issue or driving a team member crazy or something. So it's an
Well, you've heard sales
interesting,
talk about, like you've heard sales turn away clients because they're like, onboarding will kill me if I bring this one in,
right, right.
and the team will kill me. Like they just have this good tension, right? With sales,
And 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 that's a
sales is the easiest place to see how this works. Where it gets really tricky to me is in the execution phase. It's really easy if it's like a one person team to see value attribution, but
correct.
as soon as it's two people, or even if it's a one person team that should be a two-person team, like it gets really complicated really fast to create that alignment. It's
Yeah.
just such a super challenge. I mean, I've talked to so many people about this. I feel like
That's why
like
I knew. I'm like when I mentioned this topic, Matthew's gonna be like, "Oh, really, dude? Did you have to
I'm
do this?"
super like impressed with Jody Grundon's model on this. I've been trying to figure out a way to kind of work it in over here. But like there's a trade-off, right? Like where you and I or whoever like is coming up with comp plans, HR, whoever, just creates these Frankenstein plans that then administratively, when you're 140 people, 150 people, like then
Are really hard to administer.
they're really hard to administer. And you know,
And I
like
and you've seen
it starts limiting your growth. It
one of
starts,
the things that I think you really helped do when you got here was you saw I had some Frankensteins I'd kind of grown when you got here. We've I mean I was very much that way, not just with Acuity. I did that with clients. I could get pretty excited about kind of coming up with all these different mechanisms. And again, sometimes working in the tech side, you are thinking about all these huge upsides and incentives. Everybody wants to just go to the moon. And in many of those businesses, they do. They want like the drive is comp. I remember earlier on at Acuity, we had some team members who were just billing animals. They wanted to go crush it. And I look at us now, and I don't mean to say that people don't want to crush it here, but we've developed the culture. We've been much more clear about who we are and what things work well. We have people who want some balance. I mean, they don't
yeah,
mind working hard on behalf of a client or a colleague or for themselves on occasion, but they're not out here trying to go ahead and do the things they were doing maybe back in the big four world. And, that has an impact on what type of compensation models you should build as well too, because you're not trying to necessarily cover that like upside and all kinds of incentives and accelerators and things there. But it's good to, I think the thing that we're learning is making sure we get people included. When you have a hard problem like this, more eyes on it is good, more ideas. Let's grab some things from other
yeah,
firms or other people who've done this or other industries and use them. And then let's kind of go back and make some decisions. And so I think that's a good way to complicated problems. Just like, man, take advantage of the really bright people you've got in your org to help you kind of, whatever the problem is, comp or not, help
yeah.
you
And
think through creative
yeah, as I was
spots.
thinking through like our current stuff right now, I was like, oh, I'm not the best equipped person to solve this problem. Like
Yeah.
I've thought about it a lot. I
Yeah.
think I would be really additive to a team of people now to give them my perspective and some of the learns and like share some of the models other people are using and like hand it off. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? To
Yeah.
where like, because there's some people that are living this, right? Like they're living it, they're living our comp plans, they know it personally. They're gonna, if we can get context in their heads about what our limitations are, what our history is, the all the mistakes we've made in these comp plans, like for
Jeez.
the last 20 years, just 13 of them were my problems. Um, just like the other eight were on Kenji here, seven or eight were on Kenji by himself. And I blame
I
Stuart
created
too a
plenty of
little
those
bit for
problems.
those. But
Did you ever have did you ever have a comp plan that like, or do comp plans affect, have they historically affected the way that you operate in businesses? How much impact have comp plans to your behavior, how you worked in businesses? And this may
that's a
have changed over time as you've matured, or I don't know.
I don't think I've matured in time, but that's a nice thing for you to say.
You see that? I'm being nice to you today because
Um,
I threw a tough topic at
I
you.
think I have matured actually a lot. How well, I think the funny thing is I was very driven by comp plans before we partnered up. And one of the main reasons I left is because I didn't like how that made me behave.
Interesting.
So like I think I could have been a really great partner at a public accounting firm and made a lot of
Yeah.
money
Yeah.
because I could have played the game and I could have done the whole thing. I didn't like the trajectory that took me on from
Are you
a
saying though you didn't like I know I believe you could have done that. I know you could have. Are you saying that you don't know that you would have liked to you would have become like how you would what you that would have made you into? Is that what you're saying?
I think so.
Interesting.
It was on my con list, you know, for staying at Cherry at the
Yeah.
time was like it's funny because I mean I probably could have made more money there right?
I'm pretty sure you could.
I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty
I
sure.
mean, based on our
I'm pretty
historical
sure.
trend,
At least cash
and
comp, yes.
that's
Fun times of fun.
before private equity even. I think that, and the so I it's just really interesting. That was on my con list from that perspective. I
That's
don't
a
know that
really
you knew that. That's kind of
yeah. I guess I was thinking about myself first. Is like it's been a long time. I've been doing Acuity for 20 years, but I'm trying to think about how compensation plans affected me. And again, in the roles I've been in, I haven't probably actually one of the most interesting ones was when you started at Arthur Anderson. Were you still there where there were the overtime rules?
no, I missed it by a year
So I was there for the overtime
because
rules,
you're
which was
so much
weird.
older than me.
Yeah, a good full year, whatever it is. Or I guess I started 2 years ahead of you. And I was there for like I had the last 2 years of overtime rules. So it was weird. You get some interesting kind of behaviors there where if you I don't know, maybe they shouldn't have gotten rid of that in public accounting because they grind you up so much, but you could make some cash like if you went and worked extra hours. And so there were some clients, and the best example of this, honestly, back in the day was when I worked on the Augusta account. And like because you were working on weekends and at nights, your hours were out of control for a few weeks. I mean, they were just
Yeah.
nuts. I mean, in the best way possible. But you'd come back from that going, oh my gosh, I just got freaking paid because you worked a ton of overtime. And so and they ended up getting rid of that pretty quickly, unfortunately.
So
But it
so
did
my
motivate you to be like, cool, let's go. Like, let's run that,
so if you can get a sense for how close an age, my offer was for the variable rate, and they
yeah,
changed it by the time I started.
yeah, it was right there.
So,
I mean,
well,
it
the
was.
funny thing about that, my goal then was to be the lowest billing person in my class.
Is this like the lowest passing rate of the CPAs kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, like just stay off the radar. You can be like the lowest like passing rate. And
Oh
they put me
man.
on a consulting gig that kept me like perfect billable, right? Like 40 hours a week billable every week. 40 hours for every week. Not 45, not 50, not whatever. Like it was crazy.
And you do
So
have one of those names like Matthew May. It could have been like Joe Jones, like right?
Joe Smith. Joe
You
Smith.
know,
Yes, no
whereas
Kenji
Kenji
Kuramoto's. We
Kuramoto's
gotta
like,
watch out for that
what's
guy.
this guy doing? And things all
Yeah.
over the place. So yeah, you
Shows
do
up
kind of want
day
to keep
one
your
on the
head down, but
Japanese team. So
yeah, that's right. I've never, I mean, obviously entrepreneurship is probably the ultimate in terms of like a comp plan that can motivate you. But outside of that, working for someone else, I never really had anything. Again, as a accountant, you don't really have many like huge upside incentives outside of maybe having some equity and some things like that. But it's interesting. I do think it's interesting to think about that. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts about what motivated you. I think we've talked about it before on Drink Why You Think. I'm sure it won't be the last time. It's a tough space to dig into. It does require, I think working in some teams, we're going to find out some interesting things, learning from other peers in the industry, how to create models that are fair, that have some sense of, I won't say customization. We call it flexibility kind of at Acuity, but some ones that um, allow people to make it feel like, hey, it was built for them, right? It's, oh, this works for me. And if you can do that in mass, that's great. But that also doesn't incentivize behaviors that are misaligned with the culture and values of the organization. So I hope the Woodford Reserve that you probably you should have consumed beforehand helped you out there. But you did great. We got through it.
I didn't like because we rambled for about 40 minutes, dude.
We
Like
did. This
that
was
was great.
so. Thank you for Drink While You Think this week. This is more of me and Matthew's
This is
therapy
more
session.
counseling for us, like just like
Therapy session for us.
no, I think it's good
Uh,
to keep the like when you're building comp plans, I think you gotta have it's it's gotta be the place here where it was tailored to how we want the company to be, right?
right, right,
I mean, comp plans when you design them, when you're thinking about designing them, they have a pretty wide-ranging impact. So like
for sure.
if you're thinking about culture and stuff like that, like you gotta really, really think about what you want to be and how you want to articulate that. I super wish we were better at communication.
That's
Right.
the
Because
biggest thing. I'm with you
that's the thing
too.
that's killing me right now because I think everything's real fair, and I think we just really, really did this shitty communication. But woulda, coulda, shoulda, right?
Woulda, coulda,
Um,
shoulda. That's why we have a podcast, dude. If we did everything right, no one would want to sit and listen to us. We got endless episodes about the things that we've got to
at the
improve,
things
the
we're
things we
like
don't do
jacking
well.
up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this will, unfortunately for all of our listeners or those people out there, this podcast will never go away because the amount of things that we need to fix, improve, get better on, or mistakes we make is going to be endless. But it is important to kind of get out there and own them and say, hey, let's figure out what to do next about them. So it does help to have a really nice, tasty drink while you're doing it. I'm going to go ahead and rate mine up here. This is, again, the Lady Brett's from Elsewhere Brewing, Grant Park. I really want to get down there and try this place out. Looks like a great spot. Thank you, Team ADP, for this. This was fantastic. This is a 4.5 for me. Super interesting. I think this got some wine barrel action that's inside of. They're using a super funky kind of yeast. What other nerdy things can I kind of throw at you about beer? It just freaking tastes great. And it was it was one of those bottles when someone gives it to you, like, oh, this is a special bottle. They took a lot of thought in. So Mariana, thank you. This was fantastic. Matthew, you
Hazy
had
like a fox. I'm pretty sure you've already done
where is
Hazy
it
like
at?
a fox, right? Have we rated Hazy like a fox before?
We haven't. I've had it. I've
Oh,
had quite a few. We've not consumed them here on the.
okay. We're going 4.25 on this one. I'm gonna
Matthew, look at
like,
you getting a little bit like into the
dude,
hazies.
I like a
You do like
little
you like the
juicy in
hazies.
my
I don't
little
know. I don't know that
IPA.
juicy IPAs, hazies. You're fans of those. I like that you're
I
branching
think
out a
it's
little
New
bit, especially in
Realm.
these.
New Realm gets a quarter point. Maybe it was a 4 with a quarter point bump for New
Hey,
Realm. For
we got some again good brewers repping the A town. So we always appreciate that, and we always appreciate you, dear listeners. So good to be back. Send us some other topics that you'd like us to talk about. And guess what? Send us some beer and
and
you are
some beer.
getting shouted out as a sponsor. So
Here's my New
cheers,
Realm.
everyone.
Cheers.
Look forward to seeing you next time.